Hello, this is Evelyn with the Mystic Parlor and Rohini Walker, and this is the first meeting for the Esoteric Book Club. We are reading Isis Unveiled and going through chapters 1 through 8. This is originally being recorded on July 7th at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. My name is Evelyn, like I said, and I am the owner of the Mystic Parlor, which is a mystical store in the Mojave Desert, Yucca Valley, California. And this is the 5th official book for the Esoteric Book Club. Probably one of the longer things that I have kept up with in my life. And I am really excited to share this space with a new group of lovely beings to go over this kind of very, seemingly small behemoth work by Helena P. Blavatsky. I am a Libra sun in the 12th house, Scorpio rising, Mercury, Pluto conjunct in the first house, Scorpio, Taurus moon in the 7th house, North Node, Aries. I've given you enough information. That's my Scorpio rising. And I have been a working astrologer for the last 5 years and recently received my hypnotherapy certification in the winter of 2020, that year. And I have pretty much just devoted my life to unearthing and unveiling the mysteries and illumination and the occult and I guess inspiring people to also do the same. And I'll hand it over to Rohini, who is our host and co-creator of the Luna Arcana. Amazing, incredibly intelligent adept who also lives out here in the desert. So Rohini, thank you so much for hosting the 5th book of the Esoteric Book Club.
Thanks, Evelyn, for asking me. I'd say co-hosting with you. But yeah, thanks for asking me to join in and do this with you. It's quite, I'm just excited to see how this is all going to unfold. Thank you, Diana. Yeah, so I'm Rohini and I live here in Joshua Tree. I've been here for just over, coming into my 8th year. I moved here from the UK, and I'm a Cancer sun in the 7th house, Capricorn rising, Aquarius moon, and I co-create Luna Arcana with Martine, who is the visual director of it, and I'm also a writer, and I've been studying and practicing the occult sciences, as Madame Blavatsky would call it, for just over a decade now. And now I'm just in a very dedicated container of like a sort of online alchemical academy, sort of like an online Hogwarts, if you will, of people learning, just very immersive learning, inner alchemical techniques and hermeticism and tantric practices, kind of all intermingled together. And I'm sort of teaching that as well in my own business and practice as well now. So I'm just doing one-to-one work on along those lines with people. And I'm very, very into mythology and looking at just, I mean, someone asked me what my superpower was the other day, and I said meaning making. So that is literally just looking at meaning and how our souls want to weave our own individual authentic meanings in life and express that. And I'm just really interested in doing that for myself and facilitating that for other people. So that's me, and I'm excited to see what meanings we make from this work that was, so many years after it's been written. Yeah, that's me. Did you want me to read that little divination that we talked about, Evelyn?
Yeah, so Rohini just did a bibliomancy with
This book, which is amazing.
The occult I Ching, and it just fits so well. And I thought maybe it would be a good ritual to start with.
We were waiting. I just opened. This book is it's a very kind of mythic. This woman is very. She's a master at the I Ching, but this book sort of interprets it from a very feminine, mythic perspective. Anyway, so I opened it on hexagram 19, which is the new, which is Lin. And the quote she begins with is from Romans 12:2. And it says, and this is very apt for Madame Blavatsky and for all of us here, I think, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to discern what is the good, pleasing, and perfect will of God. Goddess. And the tarot card for this is Page of Wands. And essentially, this hexagram looks at the beginner's mind, which I think is a great way for us to enter into this space. And I won't read all of it, but just read a couple of little bits. Ridding ourselves of the past and of memories is a formidable task, but this is contained in the fountainhead of Shiva, the destroyer of time. The lesson of hexagram 19 is to be in the present. It is the tip of the arrowhead shooting through space, and every moment it has passed through becomes destroyed, because the only thing that there is belongs to what is before it in each and every moment. This hexagram belongs to the now and the state of mind that becomes consumed by the ever unfolding moment we find ourselves projecting through. This is the divine masculine, the creative destructive energy that burns the last moment so that the next new second can come into being. And she has a section in each hexagram called the Guru, which is the kind of channeled heart, where she says, when you think you have mastered something, that thought can actually stop you from learning. When you think you know who someone is, you place that person in a box or make him or her into a statue made of stone. The smarter you think you are, the more limited you make your mind. Better to have the mind of the fool who sees things for what they are with no prior knowledge of them. After you've educated yourself on something, make sure you forget everything and then allow yourself to have a pure experience, unadulterated by what you expected to happen. In this way, you align with nature and include everything in your perceptions instead of what you thought you would find. This is the secret to the beginner's mind. There's lots more, but that's all I'll read for now to invoke us into this space. Yeah, it does. Great. So I guess, yeah, we've got 8 chapters, and so we'll just jump into, I want to just jump straight into the preface, unless anyone had anything to say about the foreword that they wanted to highlight. And we won't spend too much time on the preface. Just with the main thing that in the preface that I wanted to highlight was her noting basically this book is a transmission from the East and West, the meeting point being Hermeticism, And she writes, our work then is a plea for the recognition of the Hermetic philosophy, the anciently universal wisdom religion as the only possible key to the absolute in science and theology. Did anyone have anything to say about that before I continue? So I just wanted to sort of highlight that as the kind of the foundational cornerstone of this book. And Hermeticism has so many different ways that it's been written about and practiced. And so this is Helena Blavatsky's particular, I'm just reading. Yeah, no, I haven't read the original, Constance. I hear that it is quite the read. We'd probably have to have a book club just for that. Yeah.
You don't have to read it, you just have to see it. It's like
and then run away.
6 inches thick. Right.
Yeah, so I just wanted to just highlight that and essentially just note that Hermeticism, I mean, it's traditionally thought of as Western esotericism, which it is, but drawing from Hermes Trismegistus and Thoth before him from Egypt. So that Thoth link also goes to the east. You know, there's links between Hermeticism and India, and there was a sort of cross-cultural dissemination going on at the time. And Apollonius, who was supposedly Hermes Trismegistus, was supposed to have traveled to India and gleaned a lot of information from there and brought it back, and there was a lot of back and forth going on. So my experience of Hermeticism is a kind of that it sort of encompasses the East and the West, which I think is what Blavatsky is also pinpointing here in this book. So I wanted to just highlight that as just like Hermeticism being the kind of foundational cornerstone of this book, but also as a kind of bridge between Eastern and Western esotericism. And yeah, does anyone have anything to add to that, or questions, or did I have any?
I think that in lieu of that way of thinking of it as a hermetic kind of lens that we're seeing what she's writing, we talked about this beforehand, but the terms in which she uses regarding gender, and in the book now we've gone through, we're in the middle of sort of re-understanding what that means in our society right now. But with Helena Blavatsky's perception of gender, I think is coming from the Hermetic perspective, which is one of the laws of Hermeticism, that there is duality and there is a nature of gender, which speaks to not like, you know, the gender of a human man, woman, but the energetic principle of how that energy moves in the realms. And so like she switches between using he and she based off of what she's talking about. So that's one thing, looking through or having read through the 8 chapters that I noticed that she does. It's because, like, you know, I think we get tired of seeing him and he and man and you know, when it comes to this, and the fact that she's a woman writing this and then still kind of in that way of writing, I thought was interesting. But then I'm like, oh wait, no, it's just it's like a hermetic also principle that she's coming from.
Yeah, and also the time that she was writing, like just the word man being the kind of all-encompassing word for the human, So just the kind of historical context that she was writing in, and the audience, her audience was going to be like sort of male, white, European audiences. So yeah, so just, it can get a bit, you know, for us now reading it's a bit tiresome, like, oh man this, man that, but it is, yeah, it is not to be taken in a sort of, yeah, like Evelyn said, in that kind of like gendered perspective. It's more of a, yeah, linguistic, historical, and hermetic principled context. Yeah, so I'm just going to dive straight into chapter 1, old things with new names. So I wanted to throw in something that, and this is sort of my subjective kind of experience of this chapter and what she's talking about, and why her reasonings behind calling this book Isis Unveiled, because it's not diving into the mythology of Isis and the cult of Isis per se, although that kind of underpins it amongst other mythologies. But my thinking behind this is that she's called it Isis Unveiled because Isis was seen as the goddess, the kind of goddess at the time, depicting nature and magic and the occult, that was essentially focused in nature. And the occult sciences, as Blavatsky calls it, emanate from nature. So I wanted to throw that out there and see what you thought about that, if you had any thoughts on that, if you completely disagree with that, or, you know, if you, yeah, that she's kind of picking up on this archetypal earth magic nature goddess from the Egyptian cosmogony.
Do I unmute myself?
Oh, you're unmuted now.
Okay, I just did it. Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, and also about the gender thing. I'm glad you got that out of the way because, you know, okay. What I'm finding, because when I stopped writing and reading and thinking, I went to the body, into nature, and my lifestyle is chop wood, carry water kind of thing. I mean, extremely. And so what I see in her book is it's about nature. It's ideas about nature. And maybe this is the precursor to reestablishing a true connection with nature, which we have lost more than any other culture that ever inhabited the earth. So I kept looking as I was reading for references to nature, and I see them, but they're very esoteric, they're very lofty, they have very little to do with chop wood, carry water, at least so far. But it's probably an essential point of view, because nature began with an idea, God or goddess's idea, something's idea, before it was manifest, before it came into being. And then further on in the book, we do have different ideas about how life manifested itself. But I'm not expecting anything but ideas about nature in this book, and they're very profound. So I appreciate it anyway.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Deep. Well, you're not Deepa. You might need to unmute.
Let me. Oh, here we are. Okay, thank you. Speaking to Isis, during the 40-something decades that I've had with this work, the evolution of Isis, of what Isis means, you know, has changed for me over the decades. And I know since 1870, you know, the 1800s, I mean, I'm so glad context was brought up as regards gender, as regards nature. Women in the 1800s were not necessarily carrying, chopping, or, they were kind of worried about their bustle or something, during, pre-Victorian times. But I'm so glad that this point was brought up, because, everything is relative, and I'm so glad that the contextual factor was presented. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. And just to expand on that, because the thing with Isis is like this cult of Isis that we and so it's mystery traditions, and that essentially is what nature is. It's this big container of mystery that the projective masculine human intellect that we all contain, regardless of gender, keeps trying to penetrate, using that language. So it's like this penetration of this mystery. So just allowing that to reveal herself is this Isis unveiling. I guess Blavatsky couldn't have spoken about it in those kinds of tantric terms or alchemical terms in those kinds of ways, but she does infer that. That's the inferences that I get as I go deeper into the book. So it's like, because it is such an intellectual tome, so it's like essentially the occult sciences, like penetrating these mysteries, these cults of mysteries of nature, of Isis, or whatever goddess you want to call it, really. I wanted to, so on page 3, where are we? Oh yeah, here we go. Where are we? Oh yeah. So this one quote, I've got lots of quotes online, but I just wanted to read, just following on from what we were just talking about. But since that time, so it's the second paragraph, sort of just over halfway through, she writes, but since that time, matter has become the formidable barrier between us and the world of spirits. The oldest esoteric traditions also teach that before the mystic Adam, many races of human beings lived and died out, each giving place and its turn to another. But basically the first part of that clause, matter has become the formidable barrier, which I just wanted to just bring in, like the kind of the word matter, the root meaning of the word matter is mother, is mater. So it's, again, it's this from a Kabbalistic sense, it's, it's divinity moving down into matter, into this dense experience, into Malkuth, to speak about it, on the tree of life right at the bottom. So just to keep that understanding of what matter is from this feminine perspective in mind, because a lot, the kind of male-centric spirit understanding of what it is to be spiritual and good is like this transcending of matter, this kind of domination of or repression of our human animal bodies, rather than to find that sublimation within by going within that. So just to keep that in mind, that, matter is, exactly, Constance. Yeah, exactly.
Rohini, can you read that out loud?
Oh yeah, sure. Matter, I forgot we're being recorded. Matter desacralized is the blockage, is what Constance just wrote. Exactly. And again, if we want to talk about word etymologies, like sacralized, the sacral chakra was often seen before the, well, in antiquity times anyway, as the kind of brain, really, before this brain became the dominant force. So so yeah, there's just lots to unpack there, but just to keep that in mind, yeah, that the transcending of matter doesn't, you know, it's spoken about in this way that, you know, our kind of earthly forms are repellent and sinful, but essentially it's also the container of the divine feminine. So anyone wanting to add anything more to that? No, I'll carry on. So then what else have I got here? Did you want to add anything, Evelyn?
Um,
I feel like I'm talking a lot.
you are talking exactly as you should, and it's fantastic. There's a lot of terms in chapter 1. There's a lot of new terminology, and I think that just in general, this is like what I got from chapter 1 and 2 and 3 is like, this is a crash course in Hermeticism and the occult. Like, there's things in here that you would just take a whole day to research, like Elohim, and the atom that she speaks of, even alone is like its own day of research. So I feel like we could just spend an entire session talking about the first chapter. But I guess we could maybe, just for the sake of like continuity into the next chapters, maybe Rohini, can you give us some descriptions of like the atom that she's saying and like Elohim, because she uses those terms a lot throughout?
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, there's a question. What does she mean by the mystic atom? Yeah, so it's the mystic atom. So it's Adam Kadmon. It's like the first human, the first kind of pre-human human, if you will, who encompassed both genders. And then the Adam that we know from Genesis, Adam and Eve, came after Adam Kadmon, or the mystic Adam or Elohim. So this first Adam was made by God, or by the divine, or Kether, in their image. And as I said, yeah, encompassed both genders. And then it was the sort of, they were in paradise, in the Garden of Eden, and it was this thirst for knowing each other as the opposite that created that sort of created the separation between the masculine and feminine. And then we had Adam and Eve. So essentially, this mystic Adam is the kind of pre-human human, if that makes sense. Are kind of, I mean, from an, and I think she talks about this. She talks about this later on. Oh yeah, don't even get me started on the, Selena says no Lilith here. Yeah, no, we don't talk about the satanic Lilith here. No, yeah, I think Lilith belongs to a different conversation. Lilith doesn't really come up in this book, because I think at the time, Lilith, and again, we have to take this in the historical context of when she was writing, Lilith wasn't really recognized even as the mythical figure that we know of her now, even from the Old Testament. She just wasn't recognized. And, you know, her, like Eve was just, you know, the first female, and that was it. So Lilith is totally like done away with, but I'd love to have a future book club looking at the mythology of Lilith, because she was the serpent, she was the bringer of wisdom, and we need a bit more Lilith energy in the world right now, I think. A bit more dissent and disobedience, please. Constance says, let us consider the source of all esoteric writings everywhere since forever, including Madame B's The Masculine. Exactly. Yeah. And again, you know, just keep tying that back to she, despite her being this very pioneering woman, she was still writing at a time when the patriarchy, as you know, was it just, I mean, we talk about the patriarchy now, but the patriarchy then was like in full force. And so she was a product of her time, very much so. And yeah, and as we get into later chapters, you know, this idea of being spiritually, a spiritual person or spiritually adept, is like this kind of like purification, this emphasis on purifying oneself through, again, transcending our material. So that again is a very like patriarchal, masculinized way of looking at spiritual evolution. And yeah, so we have to just keep remembering the time that she was writing in. But it doesn't detract from the fact that she really goes deep into the Hermetic arts and the occult sciences, and that she does keep drawing the main points that she makes throughout all of these chapters that we've looked at for this section. For this session, is that, you know, that nature is the foundation to all science. Including like now at the moment, you know, just science now kind of forgetting that there was a time before, like science has a history, and that history came from, the history of science comes from occult practices and magical practices, and mathematics is a magical language. And that's what she, you know, when she goes into talking about Pythagoras and the Platonic schools, they were all, you know, the Pythagorean cult was, you know, yeah, we have Pythagoras as an algebraic thing now, but the Pythagorean cult was very much a magical initiatory school, from where we get our language of mathematics and physics and everything else that comes as a result of that. So just to actually, yeah, talk about that, where she says, she's page 4 to 5. She writes, because the fossil implements of man are found to become more rough and uncouth as geology penetrates deeper into the bowels of the earth, it seems a proof to science that the closer we come to the origin of man, the more savage and brute-like he must be. Strange logic. I like exclamation point. I like that strange logic, because I think that really speaks to the myopia of science that that this book essentially is pointing towards. So yeah, any questions or additions to that, or observations or disagreements? Okay, so I think we should maybe move on to chapter 2, otherwise we'll be here all night. Okay, chapter 2. So, is there anything else in chapter 1 that people wanted to highlight before we move on? No?
Yeah, I was curious about when she on page 7 talks about materialism, and like in which way she's meaning that. In the first paragraph on page 7 towards the middle, it says, still materialism had already begun to gnaw at the root of faith.
Okay, yeah, so this goes back to like this understanding of materialism as being just an understanding of the world as just being like solid matter. So that's what she's meaning here by materialism. But we've also touched, but the point that I raised earlier about matter and materialism being this kind of the root of that being the feminine, she doesn't, I don't think she really goes into that in this book, but it's just something that I think we should keep in mind, because this book is very much about transcending materialism. And the way that she's talking about materialism here is just like materialist science, as in science that can only be, that's based only on what we can perceive with our senses. So yeah, so does that answer your question? Or does that just confuse you more?
No, that makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So essentially in this sense, it's just like talking about like materialist science. And oh yes, Constance raising the point here is like materialism is not matter. So I think the point here is that, you know, in the sense of it being about commerce and money. Is that what you mean, Constance? So yeah, so again, so materialism is not matter, but the root of it comes from, you know, just this chasing after matter, as in money gives us more objects. So yeah, so I think so Blavatsky's, oh yeah, Nisa.
I had just wrote, and my microphone is kind of bad, so let me know if there's a problem, but I just wrote down, like, if the nature of nature is to perpetuate itself in kind, and we're talking about emanations, especially when she goes like later on in the book, I think it might be in reference to Jupiter and not in reference to something Isis-based, but she starts talking about like Sophia and the Sephiroth, like probably in relation to the lightning strike or something. Then we start to get to thinking about how matter impedes that distillation process. So that's what I wrote in my notes, and I hope that that kind of like makes sense. The idea of like emanations being something that is inherently about polarity and magnetism, and if you bring that into matter, you're bringing something into stasis, so it can't perpetuate itself and is unnatural to what nature is.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's a really, really good point, and that kind of brings it into that alchemical realm of making the volatile fixed, which is, you know, basically what magic is, and then the fixed volatile, which is then, you know, so it's essentially like the idea, the logos turning into the sensation in matter, eros, and then round again, round again. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. That I hadn't thought about it like that, and I think, and that's that sentence can also be interpreted in that way, in the sense of the occult sciences being viewed, or like magic and esotericism being viewed with suspicion and skepticism by the mainstream, because they were like, well, you know, it's just this kind of charlatanism, fakery, money hungry type thing, which of course there are definitely elements of that. And Blavatsky herself was accused of much of that. So yeah, thanks for that.
Oh, I have something I want to chime in on. She also says on page 6, materialism has been and will ever be blind to spiritual truths, which is an idea that she's saying that throughout history, philosophers and spiritual minded people have had. And I don't know if it's a critique or a criticism on that idea or notion, but it does, like, just with the, I guess, spirit sciences or theosophy in general, or I guess, you know, the modern spiritual philosophies is this notion that we must transcend or ascend the material form or the matter, mother, or feminine space in order to be holy. And I don't know if she's being critical of that or not when she says this. Personally, I can't really tell sometimes if she's like on our side or not.
I feel that she is being critical of that, because of the preceding sentence where she says the rabble has been the same in all ages. Materialism has and never will be blind to spiritual truth. So it's like there's a separation between spirituality and matter, materialism. So if we're looking at it from the alchemical perspective, the element of earth. So, and earth, the earthly element is the divine having that experience, choosing to have that experience. So to separate that from divinity and from spirituality, I feel is that kind of masculinized patriarchal outlook. In my work, I call it this kind of colonization of the feminine, and this kind of this wisdom that is indigenous to all of us, which is what the occult sciences, i.e. the natural sciences, natural occult sciences are. So yeah, I feel that she is being critical of that and making that separation, because again, she's speaking to an audience of the time where, she was, where it's like this kind of like holier, in order to be spiritual, in order to be holy, you need to transcend all of your kind of dirty human compulsions. But again, the word holy comes from being whole, and we can't be whole unless we embody all of what we are in this human and divine. And again, going back to the Adam, the mystic Adam Kadmon reference earlier, like they were that. They were both the spiritual and the divine. So yeah. So I think, Constance, see first sentence on page 7. But the too great dependence upon physical facts led to a growth of materialism and a decadence of spirituality and faith. Yeah, that's an interesting sentence. I'm interested to know how you interpret that, Constance, while I absorb it.
I see that sentence as an explanation of how matter became materialism.
Yeah.
That the dependence on, and there's so many reasons for that. I mean, survival of the body is very instinctual, and it can definitely override the finer and the esoteric principles. But then if there are enough human beings who take advantage of that and then prey upon that to this day, I mean, more than ever, so that the dependency on matter becomes materialism, and we are enslaved to the belief system.
Yeah, I totally, I think that's what she's pointing to there with that sentence. And I think it's interesting because I think that sort of demeaning of spirituality and faith and materialism happen when when people who are within, and I feel this now, and I feel that everyone here pretty much who do work in the kind of occult, esoteric, spiritual space, I don't know, I feel that there's this kind of schism between, in asking for money for your services. I think it takes a lot of, because it's well, you should just be, that, I don't know, you should just be doing this for free or something, or like, you know, for the benefit of all, because there's this kind of like, because money has, or materialism has been monopolized to just mean this kind of capitalist greed thing, whereas money in its essence is a currency of exchange. So I feel that people, and this is just me having my little say here, and you can just totally like disagree or agree, whatever, but I feel that it's like the time now is like that people like us doing work in this space, it's like it's time for us to kind of what's the word, decolonize money, if that makes sense, to like take control back, so that so that money can mean something else, so that having money and what we do with money, what having wealth means, you know, if I know that if I was like a millionaire, billionaire, like what I would do with it is like, you know, completely different to what like Donald Trump would do with, like, obviously he's a complete extreme example, but you know what I mean. But so, and not to say I'm like so much better than Donald Trump or whatever, but just that, you know, have to reclaim the meaning of money back to the feminine. Like and I'm not just talking about women, gendered people, or like feminine identifying people. I'm talking about all genders, people of all genders. If they tapped into that feminine space and made money from that place, what would the world look like now? What would money be creating in the world now? So that's just something to throw out there, and maybe that's restoring money, restoring the meaning of money, matter, materialism back to the mother. So that's my little so yeah, that's my little thing there. But yeah, yes, money, Evelyn says, yes, money is feminine. The terminology used, bank flow, liquidation, are all elemental to water, which is feminine. Exactly. And again, so that's just like this colonization of the earth and the feminine and matter and materialism, and yeah, and the somatic space, the body, all of it.
May I?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. I would just like to mention, during this shift that we're all experiencing, you know, with the Jupiter-Saturn placement that evoked what's transpired, and the rebirthing that we women, you know, in whatever stage we are, maiden, mother, crone, but we're rebirthing a new paradigm of matriarchy, where all the values, which are money, time, all these things that were so defined by the patriarchy, all of this is transforming now as the mentality transforms now. So, you know, yes, the context of using the word materialism, you know, I mean, it's to materialize is magic to me. And so, I mean, when I read something like that, you have to take the context and kind of, I'm not going to say boil it down, but kind of allow it to form. And it took a different form 40 years ago for me, 30 years ago for me, 20. And today, knowing that the matriarchy is we're going back to that ideology where you know, we're all here to support each other. You know, this is where we are today. And I don't feel like, you know, to criticize or to pick apart like the words of HB in terms of these values. I mean, she was in this place where she was receiving, but she was translating the transmission through the mind of an 18th century woman. So at this particular juncture, money is, you can call it a commodity, a value. I mean, there's so many different definitions of, and time, there's so many. I mean, what is time and what does it matter? You know, that's like my biggest question. So thank you. Like that, that's been building up inside of me during the past few, and I just needed to release that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I just wanted to read Evelyn's comment here. Totally, I think that touches on the traditional masculine energetics. Oh, was that just meant for Nisa? Do you want to read the original? No? Okay. 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 So where were we? Okay, should we just jump into chapter 2 really quickly? So, where are we? Oh yes. So I've underlined it. Well, yeah, the first sentence that I've underlined here is, it is rare that men regard a thing in either its true or false light, accepting the conclusion by the free action of their own judgment. Quite the reverse. The conclusion is more commonly reached by blindly adopting the opinion current at the hour among those with whom they associate. And I love this sentence because I feel it was very obviously very relevant then, and it is extremely relevant now. And it is, you know, just, we are not, I feel that we're moving through a time where we're really having to stand our ground with what our bodies tell us, as in our judgments from our bodies tell us. And what is right for one person is not right for another. And like, you know, how we all began this conversation, just giving a quick overview of our, you know, sun, moon, rising. We're all different. We all have different soul signatures. And so our judgments emanate from that. So to follow the kind of herd mentality goes against the grain of the soul's, what the soul is here to do. And I feel that that sentence really speaks to that and is very relevant to this time that we're moving through as well. If anyone has anything to say or add to that. Diva says soul purpose. Yeah, exactly. And, you know, we all have different ways of lenses through which we perceive and interpret reality and meaning. So to just have one kind of dogmatic meaning force fed to us is to me a form of colonization. Being force fed our meanings is a form of colonization. And so I feel that that's my way of interpreting that sentence. To be in the free action of our own judgment is a sign of moving towards a kind of internal liberation, I think. Then let's see. Does anyone else have anything else to say on that or anything else in this chapter while I'm also looking through my notes? No? Okay, so on page 19, she talks about Plato's divine idea, that everything visible and invisible sprang into existence as that intelligent idea which, by directing its sole willpower toward a center of localized forces called objective, forms into being, so can man, the microcosm of the great macrocosm, do the same in proportion with the development of his willpower. So I feel that that's a really great summary of a magical will and the projection of that will to affect change in the world. And that again is that projective masculine, non-gender, contained within all of us, energy that goes out into matter to create change in matter, to manifest. So yeah, does that make sense, or does anyone have questions about that, or want to add to that, or elaborate on that?
Could I hog the mic one more
yes,
time?
Please do.
One more time.
No, please do. I would love it if you did.
What I had underlined, what you just wrote. And so that idea of how ideas are brought into manifestation, including, architecture, like from the most sublimated matter, if you want to call the ethers, to the most concrete, literally. And I don't know how many of us were raised in powerlessness, but I was, and I'm probably the elder in this group, big time raised in powerlessness. And so when I took off and started to live my own destiny, to be able to manifest a dream, for example, to this day, pinch me. I mean, I'm living in California. I mean, that in itself, I own my own house. And so I'm bringing it down to the personal right now, not to social change, but the awe of having actually co-created a destiny for myself without a husband, but with a lot of help, of course. But still, just the very idea of seeing something go from idea to seed to birth to actually existing is still a source of awe for me. And of course, men do it all day long. But as we women are beginning to recognize that this is how it works, and that we're doing it in a much different way, as you just said, Rohini, that is just so wonderful. And if anybody looks up what money looked like when it was first printed, you will not believe the artwork. There was not one guy on any note, not one single man. It was all goddesses. They were all Greek goddesses. What happened? Anyway, that's my 2 bit. And I think that's pretty much what that chapter is about concretizing.
Yeah, the will. Yeah.
Will, yeah.
And just to tie that into kind of like an alchemical framework, the magical will, or the magician in the tarot, or the sword, the kind of the fine, sharp sword of the intellect that represents the will, that from an alchemical perspective, because I know that now, the kind of mainstream law, Evelyn says, love that explanation, Constance. Yes. The alchemical, what was I saying? Yes, the alchemical kind of idea of the alchemical marriage essentially is about unifying the will. So I just wanted to touch on, because what Helena Blavatsky is talking about here, this kind of very finely honed working of our will in the world. And for most people who've tried that, who've done the kind of, who've moved through at some point in our spiritual careers, moved through the kind of law of attraction space of affirmations and this, that, and the other. And they're, you know, I found them to be, back when I used to do these things, a bit hit and miss. And the reason why is because it's only really looking at, well, first of all, I thought I felt like I was trying to manhandle my psyche into something, because not all of me was feeling it. So that's the sign of a divided will. And in order to, from an alchemical perspective, in order to have unite your will, it's uniting your unconscious and your conscious selves. And that can affect the change that you want in life. And so the unconscious aspects of ourselves are the kind, you know, manifest in the things that we kind of don't want in life, the shadow, if you want to call it that. So it's integrating that into a whole, the wholeness of who we are, that creates that one-pointed will. Constance writes, marriage of will and desire, exactly. And desire being something that, again, is that's kind of a bit pushed aside in the kind of masculinized spiritual space. So yeah. Nisa.
I think also interesting too, and I know that this is like a later chapter, but when it starts getting into mesmerism,
Oh yeah.
start to consider just how, like, unconsciously moving through the world at any given time, especially like how receptive we are to like commercials or logos or things like that, thinking about how much other people's wills are like unconsciously impacting us all the time, and trying to kind of like weed through all of that psychic debris to get back to the baseline of like, you know, getting free of the distractions and being like, what actually is my will? Because if we're not raised in conditions where we're taught to prioritize what our will really is, we're very susceptible to all of those forces that are being laid out there in the public every day. So I just thought that that was really interesting too, to be like, to get to a place where you're actually really just focused on like, what is it really that I want to do, that I'm trying to do? For a lot of people, like they never even get to that point. Like they're too busy just kind of like being pulled along by the flow of whatever it is, consumerism, the, you know, the desires of their parents, what their friends are doing. So
yeah, I 100% can feel that, because, you know, it is just a case of like minimizing distractions, and we are bombarded with distractions from the moment, you know, we wake up these days, unless we literally like intentionally go, okay, I'm gonna like not look at my phone until lunchtime, you know, and just focus on like, you know, so yeah, completely. And the whole notion of, you know, like you said, logos is, yeah, it's definitely hard. It's so hard. It's it is a practice. The notion of logos as in brand logos, and the whole like logos, it's an idea. So it's like, you know, it's being subliminally, other people's ideas being subliminally, or from the mesmer perspective, like magnetically transmitted to our psyches. And just, but I think being aware is just the first step to any kind of like wading through of swampiness. Yeah.
I'd love to add to that conversation just a little bit, because this is very synchronistic with something that came up just yesterday. I was in a meditation with a friend who was leading the meditation, and it was all about finding that center line and really dropping down from the mind and into the heart to really just attune with yourself, right? And we do this when we meditate. And then I just started to pay attention to the words. What are we doing? We're becoming self-centered. But that's like a dirty word. Like that's the worst thing you could be called, is self-centered, you know? And it's like, wow, when did that happen? And how much easier is it for us to be pulled along by all these programs when we are not self-centered? It's like, no, we've got to be self-centered so we can bring ourselves forward into the world and in authenticity, you know. Otherwise, if we're not self-centered, how would we ever do that? how would we bring our gifts if we weren't that?
Exactly. Yeah, I feel that in order to affect any kind of radical change in our lives and in the world, we need to start from that self-centered space. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna just swiftly move through chapter 3, just a couple of notes that I made. Where are my chapter 3 notes? Where are we? So I wanted to just point out where she's talking on page 25. Brahma is a secondary deity, and like Jehovah is a mover of waters. He is the creating God and has in his allegorical representations 4 heads answering to the 4 cardinal points. He's the demiurge, the architect of the world. So again, I just wanted to just draw attention to that in the sense of obviously Brahma being the kind of the emanation of this supreme God, goddess head, and how this reference to the 4 directions is something that exists across the globe before there was the internet, before there was anything. So that speaks to a fundamental truth that's not that doesn't need to be proved or disproved. It just was. It was something that was recognized by all cultures, that we live in this material plane where we are subject to directions in space and time, and those are the directions are things that need to be given reverence to. So we lived in this time across all wisdom traditions, lived in this space of giving reverence to the directions and their corresponding elements and how they relate to us and our constitutions, and how that then affects the way that we create and manifest in the world. And again on page 25, the lotus is the product of fire, heat and water, hence the dual symbol of spirit and matter. The god Brahma is the second person of the Trinity, as are Jehovah, Adam Kadmon, and Osiris, or rather Pymander, or the power of the thought divine of Hermes. So again, these kinds of monomythical, in the words of Joseph Campbell, like monomythical traditions that don't, so that again speak to universal truths that can't really be monopolized by any one culture, because they exist within our collective human history and consciousness. Okay, and then I wanted to chapter 4. Where did my chapter 4 notes go? Maybe I don't have any. Here we are. I don't have many notes on chapter 4. Except for Constance, you said all you need to do is click the button. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was responding to, I don't know, to Gina. You can choose to eliminate distractions. All we need is to.
I thought it was a technical. No. So yeah, and so chapter 4, the Egyptian on page 36. The Egyptian pyramid also symbolically represents this idea of the mundane tree. Its apex is the mystic link between heaven and earth and stands for the root, while the base represents the spreading branches extending again to the 4 cardinal points of the universe of matter. It conveys the idea that all things had their origin in spirit, evolution having originally begun from above and proceeded downward instead of the reverse, as taught in the Darwinian theory. In other words, there's been a gradual materialization of forms until a fixed ultimate of debasement is reached. This point is that at which the doctrine of modern evolution enters into the arena of speculative hypothesis. So I just wanted to just point that out, where she's kind of pointing a finger at Darwin and his evolutionary theory, and where he has the famous missing link, which I think that if we approach that from the perspective of humans being more than just animal skin bag creatures, but we have this otherness to us. I think that can, for those of us inclined to go into this, shed some light on the whole notion of the missing link, of something else that we are, and something else that our evolution is calling forth. So, and then chapter 5. Where are we? Did anyone? So.
In my opinion, this is where it gets fun.
Yeah, I know, that's why I'm trying to pick like one bit, because I've got like 4 bits of like note cards on chapter 5. Okay, so okay, page 43. So this is something that I spend a lot of time thinking about and practicing, and just generally in magical workings, I think it's important. Well, for me anyway, is the difference between soul and spirit. So this soul, from the Greek tradition, Platonic tradition, was also called the daimon, and different to the spirit. So the soul I see as the anima, to use Jungian language, the feminine aspect of divinity that has descended into matter, into our individual human bodies, and is that kind of emanation of divinity that wants to express herself in her particular authentic way through us, what Jung called individuation. And the spirit is the kind of consciousness that is observing this unfolding of soul. So this is spirit when you get, when you put the ego aside, or when the ego dies and is reborn, the spirit is that witnessing consciousness that is observing the soul in her dance, like Leela, just in complete adoration of her. And so that is this kind of interpenetration, and also what our DNA double helix points to as well, is this interpenetration of the masculine and the feminine aspects of just non-gender divinity moving through. And from the perspective of the Kabbalistic tree of life, the Tifereth, which is the 6th sphere. So Tifereth consciousness is to be able to get to a place of being in that place of witnessing the soul emanate in whatever way she chooses, and the soul also being another way of saying the unconscious. So this is basically a way of uniting our conscious and unconscious minds. So the soul and the spirit, their ultimate union creates the united will, the unus mundi, which is the magical will. So there's something I spend with my alchemical group, and this is our kind of thing, the alchemical marriage of the soul and the spirit. So I just really wanted to zoom in on that, because this is something that I spend a lot of time on. And she talks about it here, the difference between soul and spirit from the context of Hermeticism and the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. So I'm just going to turn a light on here. Yeah. So that was my main point for chapter 5. Evelyn, did you have anything to add for chapter 5, like on sidereal stuff, for instance?
Well, I kind of like the list that she wrote down regarding the letter to a foreign physician, and by Mesmer. And Mesmer is someone who was known for pioneering hypnotism. Mesmerized, to be mesmerized, is named after Mesmer. And so we're getting into chapter 5 of like the psychological applications of the divine experience. And I'll just read 1 through 7, the list that is written here. First, there exists a mutual influence between the heavenly bodies, the earth, and living bodies. Second, a fluid universally diffused and continued so as to admit no vacuum, whose subtlety is beyond all comparison, and which from its nature is capable of receiving, propagating, and communicating all the impressions of motion, is the medium of this influence. Third, the reciprocal action is subject to mechanical laws unknown up to the present time. Fourth, from this action result alternate effects which may be considered a flux and reflux. Seventh and fifth, it is by this operation, the most universal of those presented to us by nature, that the relations of activity occur between the heavenly bodies, the earth, and its constituent parts. And then Helena Blavatsky writes a note. There are 2 more which will be interesting reading to our modern scientists. 6th, the properties of matter and of organized body depend on this operation. 7th, the animal body experiences the alternate effects of this agent, and it is by insinuating itself into the substance of the nerves that it immediately affects them. So she's like she's bringing in the awareness of magnetism, which was brought up before. And I guess I hadn't really thought about this in terms of scientific discoveries and when this was written. And I only can relate to our modern scientific experiences and how it's changed my perception of the world and reality. But I can imagine that magnets affected theories and philosophies and ideas, and the law of attraction, the idea of polar opposites attracting to one another. Opposites attract is from this era, and it's probably how we got The Secret. How to manifest your most desired world, how to attract something to you. And so that's what I got from this. But she also talks about deja vus too, which I really like.
Yeah, I mean, deja vu is if that doesn't point to some kind of wonder within us, I don't know what does. That and dreams, yeah, we are not just mechanical cogs in a mechanical universe. There is a glitch in the matrix. Okay. So yeah, just going back to on page 45, scientists may well call these she writes them, these natural laws of evolution, cosmic laws, immutable and unchangeable. Behind these laws, we must search for the intelligent cause, which, once having created and set these laws in motion, has infused into them the essence of its own consciousness. So here I think she goes, this is a way of like where matter is infused with divinity, materialism in its most basic understanding of like just earth or an object is infused with divinity. And so then we can extend that to our discussion earlier about commerce and trade and all of those other paraphernalia of materialism is infused with a divinity, but it's been forgotten, or it's been colonized, or it's been, it's been taken over by other forces. And now, and just one more bit, and now we may ask, how can a will manifest itself intelligently and unconsciously at the same time? It is difficult, if not impossible, to conceive of intellection apart from consciousness. By consciousness, we do not necessarily imply physical or corporeal consciousness. Consciousness is a quality of the sentient principle, or in other words, the soul. So this is going back to that whole making the unconscious conscious, to quote Carl Jung, because the soul, the unconscious, is not just this unconscious thing. It's animate, it's sentient, it's just been pushed away and made unconscious, but it is the animating principle of the world. So just wanted to touch on that. And then chapter 6.
Rohini,
Yeah.
can I just, before you move on?
Yes, please do. Please just interject whenever, otherwise.
Okay, on page 45, that same paragraph that you read at the beginning of the paragraph, and this is, I'm not quite getting this. So earlier we were talking about will and desire in order to manifest. She says every objective manifestation, whether blah blah blah, requires two conditions: will and force. I mean, it's like, what? And then plus matter. Okay, so these three things, will, force, and matter, according to what she's saying, are what make things manifest. These three are all convertible forces or force correlations of the scientists. But then she criticizes the scientists for completely ignoring the fact of divine intelligence, which these men so studiously leave out of the account. So that would bring in a fourth thing: will, force, matter, and divine intelligence. But we still don't have desire, which is the prime mover for making anything. Is you want to.
I interpret her use of the word force
Yes.
as desire.
Okay.
Because
all right.
When it moves through, like eros, that it's
okay.
Like this kind of sensational.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I can buy that.
Yeah. So it's that kind of the sensation of force. The sensation of desire is kind of like this forceful thing.
It is a force. Yeah. All right. And taking into account the times and the language and all that. All right. Thank you. That's good.
Wanted to ask also before we move on, how is everyone feeling? Because clearly we're not going to get to chapter 8 at least. So, and there's still so much in here in chapter 5 that's exciting to talk about. Like,
yeah, I feel that way.
Past lives, deja vu, clairvoyance, how, clairvoyance works in this realm. And So are you guys wanting to maybe just get a little bit deeper in here and then stop, and then we'll do 7, 8, and then a little less for the next meeting next month? Yeah, okay, great.
Yes, great. So yeah, so I wanted to then in that case, so yeah, like you said, chapter 5 has a lot. So yeah, Evelyn, I wanted to know what your thoughts were on page 38, where he's talking about oh, here, where are we? He demonstrates further that in man lies hidden a sidereal force, that emanation from the stars and celestial bodies of which the spiritual form of man, the astral spirit, is composed. I just wanted to sort of get your perspective on that in terms of like from an astrological perspective and sidereal astrological perspective. Just yeah, like if we're going to go a little bit deeper, that I would, yeah.
Well, when she says sidereal, I don't know if she's talking about like, the sidereal terminology in astrology, or if she's talking about a different sidereal terminology based off of theosophy.
Yeah.
So I'm not entirely sure how to approach that. And I think that, but what is happening or starting to formulate, which gets talked about more in chapter 7, based off of what she's starting here, is this notion that there are, astral spirits, there are elementals, there are like archetypes that exist around us as human beings on Earth that we bring down from the heavens, which now we see as planets, or they saw it as planets too. I mean, there's probably a debate as to whether or not they were literally just talking about the planets without knowing that they were talking about the planets, or modern science has directed that towards the material rather than like the gods and goddesses of Greco-Roman era, Babylonian times, because our solar system in and of itself reflects the drama of life with the archetypes of the planets. And I just find it very, very fascinating. It's a mystery how the stories of the myths of these planets get played out in and of themselves, even in their discovery. And like like with Pluto, for instance, we've denied it multiple times. We've denied its existence. We say it's a planet. It's not a planet. And that in even of itself is kind of represented in Pluto's archetypal existence. So how this works, I think she's trying to build that up for us to know the science behind the subconscious, collective unconscious, as Jung put it, and how it's reflected to us, back at us through the cosmos and through our cosmogony, through all cultures, because every culture has its own relationship, its own pantheon of deities that they go through a relationship with throughout cultures and times. And I think when she gets into like the elementals more later, which I don't mean to jump ahead, but maybe it'll help to like bring this up to where we're at, maybe, is like that the deities are trying to manifest themselves on Earth through us, through their logos. And so maybe there is an agreement that we've made with these archetypes that we're like, yes, we will play out your archetype Venus. I will be Venus, and then I will live on the energy of Venus through your name, which they used to do way more. Like, how many books are written by Hermes? But it's not Hermes, it's like a collective of people who identified with Hermes archetype.
Exactly. And I feel that really speaks to the kind of broader broader notion of wisdom traditions and mystery cults, and groups that worked in service of and as kind of conduits for bigger forces, so that kept the kind of individual ego in check, because you're kind of working within a bigger field of resonance and within a bigger field of meaning. And so that kind of allows your system, your human nervous system, to then contain more of the good and the bad, because when we just think of ourselves as just these kind of like isolated ego entities, then everything is just really overwhelming, which is kind of what we're in right now. Whereas if we work in dedication to a deity or a wisdom tradition or a mystery tradition, then we're invoking something bigger into the world. So yeah, and I feel that really speaks to what science was. They were part of bigger schools of initiation and wisdom that had to be earned. Like Jung says, beware of unearned wisdom. I know we talked about this earlier today, Evelyn, but yeah, so it just, I think it keeps a certain megalomania in check. So
To
yeah,
round out that point, that you are like a little sandwich end or bookend is like the quote from the book on page 38 at the end of the page. This identity of essence, which we may term the spirit of cometary matter, always stands in direct relation with the stars from which it was drawn, and thus there exists a mutual attraction between the two, both being magnets. The identical composition of the Earth and all other planetary bodies and man's terrestrial body, or a person's terrestrial body, was a fundamental idea in this philosophy. The body comes from the elements, the astral spirit from the stars. Person eats and drinks of the elements, for the sustenance of the blood and flesh from the stars are the intellect, and thoughts sustain their spirit.
yes, I love that. Yeah, and I guess this will come up more in the elementals chapter, but just the whole notion of astrological associations with herbs and plants. And so that is essentially like, certain offerings made to certain planetary deities, but they contain those elemental associations. So or metal, for instance. So it's like, we are very much living in that as above, so below kind of field of meaning. But it's just forgotten about, and we're just in this kind of like, oh no, this is just a plant and it has no meaning beyond just using it. So anyway. And oh yeah, so I wanted to just point this the déjà vu mention from page 41, the last paragraph on page 41. The well-known fact, one corroborated by the personal experience of 9 persons out of 10, that we often recognize as familiar to us scenes, landscapes, and conversations which we see or hear for the first time, and sometimes in countries never visited before, is a result of the same causes. the Akashic records that she was talking about earlier. Believers in reincarnation adduce this as an additional proof of our antecedent existence in other bodies. And I feel that this, Evelyn, with your work with past life regression is just very, you know, because you've been doing that now for a while. And, you know, it's definitely, for me, having experienced a session with Evelyn, and just very much a believer in reincarnation. Yeah, just that we continue on our cycles. So, and that's considered an unscientific worldview, and I can totally understand that, because it's like, you know, there's no objective proof to these things, aside from the fact that no energy ever is just, you know, energy is always recycled. So that includes our soul's journeys as well. Yeah, and then she quotes Eliphas Levi, as Eliphas Levi beautifully expresses it: nature shuts the door after everything that passes and pushes life onward in more perfected forms. The chrysalis becomes a butterfly, the latter can never become again a grub. So we're always in this kind of forward moving motion of evolving and unfolding and revealing more and more layers of our soul's meaning and purpose and magic. So yeah.
I have a question on that. Do you think that's true? Do you think that, I've always wondered this, that you don't devolve or involve, as a term that was brought up in this book also later?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think about time in a non-linear way, which I do, like in a spiraling way, then yes, it's kind of, you can revisit the same thing. Whereas if you think about time in this linear way, just moving forward, which I don't think time exists in that way, then the Eliphas Levi quote is like, yeah, you just keep moving forward. But even in the devolution, like, so this is the question again, like, even if you're going back, so even if you devolve or involve, do you feel that the kind of unconscious wisdom that's contained in the soul can then be reused in that revisited devolution?
Good question. For someone that maybe wants to answer it. Take a stab.
It all depends.
I think that's probably where, like, the whole deja vu thing, you know, comes from, or yeah. Can't hear you, Constance. Oh, I didn't hear you. Okay. Then. Oh, here. So, and this is where, so yeah, I've underlined here to going back to this kind of non-linear view of time. Besides, on page 44, besides, eternity can have neither past nor future, but only the present, as boundless space in its strictly literal sense can have neither distant nor proximate places. So essentially, you know, this kind of timeless now that we're in, that the kind of bigger Godhead mind is experiencing all of this through. Yeah. What else did we have to talk about here? Oh yeah, so on the last page of chapter 5, I've highlighted on page 46, from Prophecies are delivered in two ways: consciously by magicians who are able to look into the astral light, and unconsciously by those who act under what is called inspiration. To the latter class belong the biblical prophets and the modern trance speakers. So familiar with this fact was Plato that of such prophets he says, no man when in his senses attains prophetic truth and inspiration, but only when demented by some distemper or possession by a daimonian or spirit. Some persons call them prophets. They do not know that they are only repeaters and are not to be called prophets at all, but only transmitters of vision and prophecy. Just where's my chapter 5? So I'm just trying to find my notes, but I'll just try and remember what. Yeah, so the reason I highlighted that is essentially there's my teacher who I've been working with for a long time. She always says, we're never not doing magic. It's just a case of making our magic conscious. And I feel that that's what this paragraph is kind of, to me, it speaks to that. We are always creating and manifesting, either consciously or unconsciously, as she mentions here, consciously by magicians who are able to look into the astral light, and unconsciously by those who act under what is called inspiration. So just to bring it into that, just making our magic conscious is essentially being in relationship with all that our lives are right now. And that's, in a way, a mundane way of looking into the astral light. And then when you are able to be in relationship and approval, you're making your unconscious conscious, and you're making your magic conscious. So like we are just here as like, as wands, as transmitters, and we're never not doing magic. So I feel that paragraph speaks to that, and I'd love any questions or interjections or disagreements on that, because that's a big topic, and I feel that.
Yeah, I would love to jump in. I was going to type it, but that's so much easier to just say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like this ties perfectly back to that other idea where if we're not self-aware, grounded in ourselves and realizing that our words and our thoughts and our intentions are literally creating magic all the time, that the people who are not in that awareness are perpetuating the programs of others. And it's going to be en masse, whatever's put on the screen and the most viewed, whatever stuff. That's why it's kind of like, I mean, you guys, we're all on the same page here. It's like, just a shame that mainstream media can have that much more of an advantage per capita of viewers, who are going to then consume this information and literally not know that they're practicing the magic to perpetuate it.
That's essentially the world we're unconsciously living in right now. Although I feel that we're becoming more conscious, but
yeah. And it makes me, I don't even know the word that it makes me feel, but it's like, sometimes I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, I feel like, yeah, what am I even doing here? And also I feel a deep sadness.
yes.
It's overwhelming sometimes. And that the moment that we act on our impulse from our own hearts to transmit this information to the people that we look at, and we're like, I don't know you, but I love you, and we're part of the same thing, and let's get on the same page, then you're like crucified, unless you're in a small little circle like this of like-minded people. It's not received very well. And I'm wondering if that is part of the built-in programming that is, so strong right now.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel that you know what you're saying, just this people just unconsciously, including us, you know, we're all part of, we're all dreaming this same dream together, even if you know some of us are just like, no, we're still, you know, we're still kind of in this space-time moment together, and yeah, and it's so, it is very, you know, and I feel that there's awakenings happening, and to be able to speak to, yeah, speaking to that feels dangerous, feels really actually like on a physical level dangerous, to say, you know, to put your head above the parapet and say, oh, I don't, that doesn't feel right for me, but you know, but I respect your choice, is just, you know, not, you know, I want to do my own magic for myself consciously and create my own, like, you know, co-create my world with my soul spirit. It's like, no, you know,
Oh my gosh,
so,
and now I'm getting a deja vu right in this very moment.
oh wow,
It's happening of like, yeah, I literally can't consume this information because it's like I don't want to be part of that spell. And I feel like such a freak sometimes because I cannot watch that movie, or I can't, you know, see these commercials. I can't.
well, you're in good freak company here, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Think
no,
of this too, to like going off of your point of like it, well, I know the feeling in me. It makes me angry. It makes me very, very upset knowing too, when we think about Mesmer, who was writing this in 1775. So, you know, there is a very intelligent aristocratic sect of the population that knows this, that has had this awareness of what powers the unconscious has, and they've been using it ever since. And that's why it was kept secret from us, especially women. Like women weren't allowed to even study the Kabbalah until I think the 90s. Women weren't even allowed to join fraternal orders until actually it all kind of came about like in the 90s. I think the 90s was a big like radical time for these secret mystery schools to open up for a lot of women. But 1775, that's like what, over 200 years at this point, that this Mesmer was talking about deja vu, the unconscious, hypnosis. So, you know, and I think about too Freud's and Jung's philosophies and theories that, I mean, the whole aristocratic sect that had money to research this stuff has been experimenting with it since then for like 200 years. And it's not mainstream awareness. And so, yeah,
oh, sorry, carry on. Sorry, interrupting.
I was just going to keep going about how angry I am.
Well, just going, you know, this aristocratic, like kind of power monopoly, and like look at the state of financial, the, you know, or the 1% have the totality of wealth, financial wealth in the world. So I feel that there are, you know, there are things to be noted with that. And I know that we, you know, we don't want to get into like, but it's just, it is just, it's there, like, you know, the discoveries by Mesmer, what he essentially discovered was a way to influence people's psyches unconsciously. So, and if that information was kept within a little exclusive container, then we're living, you know, and then just kind of drip fed out into the world. Yeah Nisa.
I was just thinking about like Evelyn, when you're talking about that it's been like kind of recently, as far as the 90s, when things were opened up more, and just thinking about potentially that being an offshoot of the Uranus-Neptune conjunction that happened around that time, which is also about the time that the internet started, when like we started to have this platform essentially for like mass consciousness to be re-envisioned in a different way, and how much that's kind of like affected our trajectory since, in ways that's like obviously has a lot of good but has a lot of bad to it too. Like the ability of people to be able to free themselves from this kind of mesmeric influence also has kind of created a whole new can of worms that like now we need to figure out how to navigate in different ways. So that to me is just interesting.
Perhaps this is like me just being a bit too simplistic, but I feel that the discoveries of Mesmer, if put into the hands of like women leaders, would have maybe created a different world. So yeah, and I don't mean, I mean just, you know, people with a strong feminine inclination within them. So
May I?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I would just like to say it never occurred to me to ask permission. So when I'm hearing about, you know, you weren't allowed to study the, you know, we weren't allowed, women weren't allowed. I was studying the Kabbalah, you know, I teach the ancient cultures. So I delved into things from a very early age because I didn't, it never occurred to me to ask permission. I just had this, something inside of me craved it and I needed to feed it. So I needed to find out where I could go to do that. And I went, but I didn't wait for somebody to show me, give me, teach me. And I've always said, don't give me a fish, give me a fishing rod. But however, you know, and coming from an Italian family where I was told, you know, my ambitions were totally ignored. Nobody ever asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I mean, so I was just like so and I think that women, if you wait for somebody to tell you it's okay, or if anybody waits to be told that it's okay, you're missing out on so much. You're depriving yourself, but you're making the choice to do that. So you need to free yourself from the obligation to wait for somebody to give you permission, I believe. I don't know. I just needed to get that out. Sorry. I'm loving this, by the way.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Yes. What else did I have? Did anyone have anything else for chapter 5? I know that there is a lot more, but we are getting close to like 9 o'clock. Should I just, do you want to move into chapter 6, Evelyn? Quickly? No? Should we tie it up?
Just one comment before we leave chapter 5.
Yeah.
I think it was chapter 5, somewhere along the way, Rohini, we were talking about living in the now. You know, that's kind of a concept that's been accelerated in the past couple of decades, especially since Eckhart Tolle. And then there's living in the now, there's linear time, but nature lives in cyclical time. Like you were saying, you know, when you're asking, are we really evolving? And I've struggled with that question, and I go back and forth, and then the cyclical time kind of answers the question. And then I say, does it really matter? Does the issue really matter? You know, that it's like an issue of whether we evolve or not belongs to the patriarchal and perhaps esoteric domain. But there's a place where it's moot, where it is not an issue.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, because we are really only experiencing ourselves moment by moment anyway. So, but but I definitely think that spiral of time is more, and the planets move in this elliptical spiral. They don't move in a straight line. It's cyclical. So, and I feel that reflects time rather than just this straight line. So, yeah. I think, shall we wrap it up for now, Evelyn? Do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I'm fading.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm hungry. And my Taurus moon, so bad combo. So
Yay.
I can honestly say I love all of you, and I'm so glad that you guys are here and sharing this space. It's really wonderful to have y'all and all of your perspectives and all of your wisdom, because there's so much wisdom in this ethereal Zoom room right now. And I hope to see you all at the next one next month. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording and then just kind of go into goodbyes. But for the next meeting, then it'll be chapter 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, if we can.
If we can. Yeah.
Seeming like it's gonna be a bit longer of a book club than I anticipated.
This time we can just, luxuriate our way through the book.
All right, so then for the recording, for everyone who's following along on YouTube, read as much as you can and we'll go through whatever we want. So how's that for a matriarchal version of a book club? Thank you so much.